Shayna Hubbers. In 2012, a Kentucky woman named Shayna Hubbers shot her boyfriend Ryan Poston 6 times and claimed that it was in self-defense. Prosecutors said she murdered him because he wanted to break up with her. Surveillance footage from the police interrogation room showed Hubbers dancing and singing, "I did it, yes I did it," just hours after the shooting. It only took 5 hours for the jury to determine they believed the prosecution. Hubbers was first found guilty of murdering Poston in 2015 and sentenced to 40 years in prison. The trial was thrown out after it was revealed one of the jurors had a prior felony conviction, which is illegal in Kentucky. Hubbers wept into the lap of her attorney before the verdict was read. She also mouthed the words, "I love you," to her mother. Poston's family released a statement after the verdict, saying it brought them peace but not happiness. On the night of October 12, 2012, Poston was supposed to meet Miss Ohio 2012 Aubrey Bolte for a date. Instead, the young lawyer was found dead in his penthouse apartment, shot 6 times in the forehead, back, and torso. Diana Lovejoy. Diana Lovejoy and her firearms instructor, Weldon McDavid Jr., were convicted separately of charges including conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. At the time of the shooting, Lovejoy and her then-husband, Greg Mulvihill, were in the midst of a heated divorce. The two sides reached an agreement that they would share custody of their young son, and that Lovejoy would pay Mulvihill $120,000. That payment was due weeks after he was shot. Lovejoy and McDavid planned the crime after meeting at a gun range where she was taking lessons. Lovejoy collapsed in court after she was found guilty of a conspiracy charge as well as attempted murder, promoting loud gasps from the courtroom. Her family members sobbed and asked for someone to help her. Judge Sim von Kilonowski cleared the courtroom so the 45-year-old could receive medical attention. Paramedics wheeled her out. It appeared that she had been overcome by shock. After court resumed, the same jury then returned guilty verdicts against McDavid. As his family watched, the 50-year-old put his head in his hands and cried. Lovejoy, of Carlsbad, faces at least 25 years in prison. McDavid, who pulled the trigger, faces 50 years to life. Jodi Arias. Jodi Arias is perhaps one of the most notorious women in contemporary true crime. She smiled in her mugshot, sang "Oh Holy Night" while in police custody, and was convicted of first-degree murder in 2013 in the trial of her former boyfriend, Travis Alexander. On June 4, 2008, Jodi Arias butchered her ex-boyfriend, Travis Alexander, just after they had sex. His body was found days later with 27 stab wounds and a gunshot to the head. Travis Alexander first met Jodi Arias. He thought he'd met the love of his life. Instead, he met his killer. Less than 2 years later, Arias stabbed him at least 24 times in the shower and shot him in the head. Initially, she admitted to the police that she had driven to Alexander's house on June 4th. Arias claimed that they had sex, and she'd started taking photos of him in the shower. But then, she said, 2 mass intruders appeared and murdered him. But later it turns out she was the killer. Though Arias' defense claimed that she had killed her former boyfriend, Alexander, in self-defense, a jury convicted Arias of first-degree murder. Arias was up for the death penalty, but after 2 mistrials, a judge sentenced Arias to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Erica Mae Butts. A Charleston courtroom was setting for a bizarre scene when 2 lesbian lovers collapsed, wailed uncontrollably, and hyperventilated after hearing that they would serve life for killing a 3-year-old girl. Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham had to be picked up off the floor by court officials and held in chairs as they were wheeled out of the room. The mother of Butts was physically thrown out by 3 staff members after shouting loudly at her daughter to "Get up!" then screaming, "I can't leave my baby like this! My baby is out!" As sobs echo from the gallery, a clerk can be heard to ask, "Do we have any EMTs in the building?" while others trying to get a panting Butts to slow down her breathing. Butts and Cunningham, both 25 from Summerville, South Carolina, were told on Friday they will spend the rest of their lives in prison for beating Serenity Richardson to death in 2009 while the toddler was in their care. Serenity was visiting Butts, her godmother, and her mother's best friend, and Cunningham, who was Butts' lover, for 2 weeks at their home in Summerville, South Carolina, when the abuse took place. Butts admitted to Summerville police on Thursday that she whipped Serenity with a belt for urinating on the floor. By the time paramedics reached Serenity, she was already dead and had been placed on ice and exposed to bleach in desperate attempts to revive her. Circuit Court Judge Deidre Richardson said nothing had ever affected her as strongly as the photos of the little girl's battered body. Keandria Cook. This is Keandria Cook. 14-year-old Keandria Cook used a dating app to lure Perry Nita, who invited Emmanuel Purcell. Cook's then-boyfriend, Kendrick Bass, is accused of shooting Purcell during a carjacking. He survived the shooting, but she was sentenced for 20 years in prison. The video of Keandria's meltdown saw her wailing to hold her mom one last time before being jailed, only for courtroom guards to take her into immediate custody. Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusaria. Tatiana Fusaria and her ex-husband, Seth Welch, were both convicted on charges of child abuse and murder in the death of their 10-month-old daughter, Mary. Mary's death was the result of malnutrition and dehydration. Prosecutors alleged that the infant hadn't been fed in days, having gained only a single pound in the 10 months since her birth. During her first criminal trial, Fusari testified that she was the victim of abuse at the hands of her husband for years, telling jurors that Welch had held a gun to her head and raped her. Welch called 911 on August 2, 2018, and reported that he had found Mary dead in her crib. Video of how Fusari and her husband Seth Welch reacted after they were initially charged has been viewed more than 11 million times. Welch could be seen with mouth agape as he learned that he faced life without parole, while Fusari cried. Kent County Judge Paul sentenced Tatiana Fusari and Seth Welch to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Samantha Gregg. This is Samantha Gregg. Gregg was an aspiring singer who had performed with the band Undecided at the Ann Arbor Summer Music Festival. Gregg testified in Clinton County Circuit Court that she, Breedernitz, and Heim traveled to East Lansing with plans to beat up and rob Froka, although she didn't say how they knew him. Gregg told the court that she drove Froka to several ATMs before the others started beating him. Froka died because of several injuries. Gregg, 18, pleaded guilty to charges of manslaughter and unarmed robbery in the Clinton County Trial Court. Gregg was sentenced up to 15 years behind bars. Eileen Warnos. Eileen Warnos, or Lee Warnos, is considered the first female serial killer in the crime history of the USA. She killed 6 men and committed robbery. She was working as a sex worker in Florida State when she started her killing spree. During her childhood, she was mentally, physically, and emotionally abused by her grandfather. Later, she started working as a prostitute at age 15. When she was working as a sex worker in Florida, she was often tortured and humiliated by men. Some men even beat her brutally. During her trial, Warnos was remorseless and angry. After she was convicted and given 6 death sentences, Warnos began screaming at the jury. She called the jurors scumbags and warned the judge that she would kill again. She had spent a decade on death row. Warnos showed no desire to delay her sentence before her execution. She said that through death, she wanted to pay for the crimes that made her so notorious in life. Finally, she was executed by lethal injection at 9:47 in the morning on October 9, 2002. Sordid, sensational, and chilling. Her story was retold in 3 movies, 2 books, a comic book, and even set to music in an opera. That was it for today's video. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to our channel and hit the like button.